Welcome, everyone, to another episode of LunarCRUSH Live. We are super excited today. We've got Dr. Leemon Baird from Hedera Hashgraph that's here with us. We're going to be talking through all social, get your questions in there. We'll do the best we can to get all those answered. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. We got all sorts of fun stuff coming up. When the market is down, you got to come hang out with us and kind of get back up. Just also disclaimer, reminder as always, we don't take payment for our live streams. We bring on cool people and projects that we're interested in, that are working really hard out there to, create the industry that we want to work in the future we want to live in. So with that, John, tell us what's happening on social today.
Well, let's start with some positivity, because I'm pretty sure the community needs some of that over the last few weeks. It's been rather tough, to put it lightly. But I want to back up above Hedera and just kind of talk about a little bit where the market's been at. I think it's really easy to look at what's going on in the next candle, waking up and seeing the market's down again. The last, since I believe May 12th, has been pretty tough, but I just want to zoom out a little bit to talk about where the community's at and just understand that like a year ago, this is looking at the same sources and everything, by the way. We were measuring 257,702 social mentions on this day a year ago. When we look at yesterday, that was 870,178. That's after the fall. That's after everything that's gone on since we had an all-time high here on, let me go there, May 12th of over 2 million posts. So we've seen a lot of the wind taken out. There's a lot of retail. When we look at the number of individuals, it correlates pretty similarly, where the number of individual accounts, we're seeing about 340,000 a day. But again, a year ago, that was 40,000 a day, unique accounts. So the community's grown substantially since. And when you look into Hedera, let's look at that. So still amazing. I want to look at the volume first here. When we look at the social volume, back again, just to have that same narrative, a year ago on this day, we had 258 social mentions. And here we are, we have 2,070, which is an increase of, overall in total, when you sum it all together, 890%. You could also see that the price change is still up 286.95% over the last year. So really important to know that it's tough to look at each day. But when you look at things just in general over time, it makes more sense. And so, again, when we look at the number of contributors, the number of social contributors, this is unique social accounts posting on a 24-hour basis, as much as 6,116. And I seem to recall, I think we even posted something on Hedera that day. There was some insights going on there. When we look a little further at the who is talking about Hedera, we measure influencer activity as well. And we measure that really through three major elements, which is how much engagement are the posts getting that this account is making, how many posts are they posting, and how many followers do they have relative to everyone else. And we look at it in various timeframes, and we look at it per coin. And we could see things like, Credible Crypto is the number one influencer for Hedera over the last year, and 34.2% of their posts related to Hedera Hashgraph, more than Bitcoin. And so you see Hedera's number two, you got XRPL, XRP Mommy, 360 Trader, Jordan Freed, Coinman, the H Barbarian. We got Mando.
Coinman, the H Barbarian's in the chat as well over here.
Well, welcome, Coinman. We're happy to have you here. We got Mando, Uphold, and Christian Hasker, HBAR price. And, we didn't make the top 10, but just to say, we have posted about Hedera because there has been a lot of really interesting activity over the last year. So let's dive in. Let's bring in our guests. Let's talk a little more detail about Hedera today.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi.
Man, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here.
You got a lot of fans in the chat.
Well, hello to you. I really appreciate all of you.
Awesome, nice. Man. Well, thank you so much for being here and appreciate that. And yeah, just kind of looking at those metrics as John's going through. That was the epitome of what we kind of call it groundswell of social and community that's kind of created over time. And when you zoom out, it looks really well. So congrats for all the success there. And yeah, we always like to start with, where are you in the world today, and what's it like there?
Well, we're in Dallas, if that's what you mean, just location.
Yeah.
Our headquarters is in Dallas, but we have people all around the world, a lot in New York, a lot in California, a lot of people overseas. But Dallas is our headquarters, and we have a bunch of people here. We're all still working from home, like much of the world is, but I'm looking forward to maybe getting together in the near future.
Yeah, and as we all are, which is going to be great to, like we were saying backstage, you get rubbing the atoms together faster, right? Kind of create that creative that comes out of it. So yeah, I mean, I want to dive into the project a little bit, but I think I'd love to hear a little bit about your backstory and kind of how you found crypto and why you decided to kind of go full steam ahead into it. I'd love to hear the backstory of how you got started.
Oh, yeah. So, I just like math problems. There are math problems I'll work on for decades and probably will never solve them, but occasionally I solve one. And one that I just thought was fun was the question of, could a bunch of computers come to consensus that was truly secure, ABFT, but also very, very fast? And I just thought it was an interesting math problem. And, I would work on it really intently for a few days, and I would go through all the possibilities, and I would really be able to convince myself, no, it's impossible. You can't solve it. There is no solution. You can't be fast and secure. You have to choose.
Right.
But like many math problems that I just come to a conclusion, no, I can't solve it. It just comes back and, gnaws at me, and I have to pick it up again and start working on it again. And so I just kept doing this for years. I don't know, from 2012 to 2015. Just one of these fun problems. I got lots of problems like that. But then in 2015, I realized, wait a second. When we're talking to each other, if you just added 2 little hashes to each message you sent to just tell what was the last message you sent and the last one you received, just that, the last one you created, the last one you received, then when someone collects all these messages, they would be able to put them together like puzzle pieces. They would hook together. And from that, you could tell exactly how we all talk to each other. And so you would just gossip to get the word out fast. And then with zero communication about consensus, you could reach consensus without ever talking about consensus. And you could have asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance, which means you have finality in a few seconds. You have huge throughput because we're not sending any messages at all about communication about the consensus. We're just sending out the raw transactions basically with these 2 little hashes on each one, on each collection of transactions. And so you have incredible speed. But you are Byzantine fault tolerant, you're asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant, which means even if somebody can DDoS and shut down one of your nodes, distributed denial of service, it'll still run. And I said, wow, this is a cool solution to a fun math problem. And it's just fun when that happens. It's a puzzle. I solve puzzles for fun. It was a fun puzzle to solve. And then I said, this is actually useful. And so we started a company to do the private ledgers. And then we said, oh, that worked. That caught on. And so then we started a company to do the public ledgers. And now we have Hedera going strong since 2018.
That's amazing. And you went at it as just being curious, right? You just went at it and said, I think that let's see if we can solve this. And that's where it all comes from. That's beautiful. Yep.
Lots of fun. I like puzzles. It was a fun puzzle.
And you said you started with private. So kind of what did that entail and how did that come to life? And then, at what point did you say, okay, I think this is something that we need to take out to the public world?
Sure. So we started this private company, Swirlds, just to prove out the technology. You couldn't start with the council that we have now. You had to start somewhere to prove that it was real. And so we did that. We got investors, we got customers. CU Ledger was a collection of credit unions. And we said, you know what, this is working. We announced it to the world then in 2016 at a conference. And at that conference, Mance and I were sitting in a restaurant and we were saying, you know what, we should do a public ledger. But the right way to do a public ledger is to get basically a council of some of the biggest, most respected people in the world, all around the world, famous organizations that are huge. It's hard to bribe them. They care about their reputation. We would have them governing it. And that is the key to making a public ledger that has truly transparent and truly trustworthy governance. And then we use this cool Hashgraph thing that's incredibly fast and very secure. And so we did it. 2016, we said, yeah, let's go get companies. And we were crazy. We were saying, let's get companies like Google and IBM and LG Electronics. I mean, that's kind of insane to to say, hey, let's get them to do this. And they're not just advisors, they actually own us and run us. And then that's what we got. We got those 3 names plus a whole bunch of other names that are, oldest bank in South Korea, the biggest bank in Africa, and payments that is a household name. FPOS is a household name in Australia for payments. All sorts of interesting things. We'll talk more about them, but that was the journey. Was once we knew we had a good technology is nothing unless you also have good governance, and we set that up.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, John. Yeah.
I'm curious, you said you announced a conference in 2016. Was that the Crypto Invest Summit in LA?
No, it was Paying Identity has a conference. It was in a different space. One of our first investors was Paying Identity. So it was identity. It wasn't even blockchain. But we announced this way of doing blockchain better. And then, of course, since then, we've talked at quite a few things. This year will be my 3rd year at Consensus. But yeah, we just started with the math puzzle and at an identity conference, telling the world about it, then grew from there.
And so some of these companies that you had gone to, I mean, you had been kind of working with some of those people already. And so the people maybe that were using some of the private blockchain side, were those the original ones that you kind of chose for kind of what was like an original DAO?
You know what? We actually aimed higher than that. We were using bigger companies than that.
Gotcha.
Also, there was a day when banks didn't want to get involved in this stuff. They thought it was dangerous. And now we have a bunch of banks on our council. But in the very beginning, banks and credit unions were not the first group you go to for blockchain governance. They were afraid of this stuff. They thought it was important and were watching it.
Yeah.
It's been a theme for years. This is really the year where people are now actually doing it. But for years, everyone's on the sidelines, just watching, seeing what would happen.
What were some of those early use cases?
Yeah. So for the ledger itself, the ability to do payments and including very micro payments very fast was a huge use case. Even before we had the consensus service, people wanted to do consensus service, which was kind of funny. People really wanted to send information into an immutable ledger with the timestamps of when it happened. And so what they were doing is sending each other 0 H bars, but with a memo field that had the information they wanted forever recorded. So even before we had the consensus service, people were so desperate for a consensus service, they were using our crypto transfers as if it were a consensus service.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just really crazy. People, when there's a demand for something, people will find a way to do it.
It's just like a truth machine. They were just sending memo and information, and they thought they needed to know that and stamp it at a certain time, and that was it. That was the full feature.
That's it. Yep.
What kind of information was it?
Sorry?
What kind of information was it that they were trying to send back and forth?
So there's a lot of people right now that use us even now. I mean, we're doing all sorts of things like tokenization and everything, huge interest in that. But we still have a lot of interest in being able to do proof of action, recording provenance of things. So you have people like ad stacks that are a middleman between advertisers that will put ads on their website and the people who want to sell the advertisements. There is an enormous amount of fraud in that industry.
True.
Huge amount of fraud. I'll put an ad on my website and then I'll tell two different clients, oh, I showed your ad. No, actually, I showed your ad and you lie. This is enormously common.
Ad stacking.
Yeah, sorry?
It's ad stacking.
Yeah. Yes. So AdStacks is a company that is stamping out this kind of fraud where you're telling everyone that you showed their ad at the same time when you're really just showing one ad. And what they do is they record in real time what ads are being shown, the events of showing ads on Hedera, and those other people can see it in real time. And so a client who says this advertiser was advertising for me knows that they're not keeping two sets of books and telling someone else that they were advertising for them. It stamps out that kind of fraud. And then, we have the Coupon Bureau doing the same thing with coupons. The amount of fraud in the coupon industry is mind-boggling. Just the inefficiency. They take those paper coupons, put them in big trash bags, send them off to another country and have people by hand go through and record them all. It takes months for a store to get reimbursed or a producer, whatever, to get reimbursed for the money that flows because of a coupon. It's really crazy. And so with the Coupon Bureau, they're a huge organization, lots of coupons. When you spend a coupon at a store, it ends up going through Coupon Bureau. Just like outside advertising goes through AdStacks. Coupon Bureau is saying, no, we're going to take every coupon in real time as it gets scanned, put it through Hedera. And that's what they're doing. So it's really cool. And people are using Hedera for provenance. You want to know that you're eating food that really is, it says it's organic, but where did it really come from? And was it ethically sourced? Or, if you buy diamonds, are they blood diamonds? All sorts of things. Pharmaceuticals. Would you like to know that your pharmaceutical was produced through a supply chain that is trustworthy? You can track that stuff. So there's enormous interest in just storing information on a ledger immutably and being guaranteed that if you see something, you will see the same thing. Two different people will always see the same thing. Huge implications for ledgers. And some of our earliest uses, some of our earliest big uses were along those lines. And then today we have tokenization, and that's not replacing it, it's adding to it. And tokenization is really hot.
Yeah, can you expound on that? I mean, it's tokenization of some of the projects that are already utilizing Hedera for, for like immutability, or they're using it for logistics or wherever they're using it. And now they're saying, no, we're also going to tokenize and we're going to do this on top of Hedera.
There are a lot of companies, and it isn't just Hedera. This whole industry right now, the world is extremely excited about tokenizing things and DeFi and all sorts of things that come along with it. It's just really interesting. So we have people, Hero does it, Tune FM does their jam tokens, and they're doing tokens so that you can listen to music and do micropayments with tokens for your music. You have people that are tokenizing fine art and expensive wines and things like that. And they're building it on Hedera because the tokens on us are really fast and cheap. So you can do 10,000 a second, and you pay 1/10 of a cent for each transfer. So you auction off your $1 million painting and transfer somebody a token, and they just pay 1/10 of a cent for the transfer of $1 million worth of stuff. It's mind-boggling. It's really cool. So we have people doing that, tokenizing things like that. We have people tokenizing things that haven't been tokenized before. So like Galaxy, the Spencer Dinwiddie company, he is helping creators to tokenize things. And you can tokenize ordinary things, but you can also tokenize things like your own future revenue, your own future income. So he did this. He sold part of his own future income with the NBA. And he's helping other people now to do that. You can tokenize your own future, which is really interesting. You haven't seen that in the past. Or you can tokenize shoes. We actually have several people that are tokenizing shoes. Did you know there's a whole collector's market in shoes?
I do. Yeah. John knows that a lot better than I do.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Well, they're tokenizing them. And so then you can see provenance, which is important. You could have fakes and things. We have people that are doing RFID chips inside of things, and you tokenize the thing connected to the RFID chip and the serial number of it so that you can track things like that. It's provenance, which helps. If you're buying collectibles, you want to know where it's been, that it's not a fake. You really want to know that it's not a fake. Spencer is also doing things like tokenizing the ability for people to influence what shoes he wears at the next game. I mean, this is crazy. You never have this in the old days of stock markets and people in commodity pits throwing numbers at each other and yelling. You couldn't do any of this stuff. Whole new kinds of things can be done with tokenization. And that if you're using ledgers. And so people are building all these things on Hedera. We have, green energy. You put a solar panel on your house, it gives you electricity. Wonderful. If you have excess electricity, you want to sell it back to the grid. Maybe you'll displace some of these carbon producing things with your carbon free things. Yay. But how can you buy and sell it as a market? You could just sell everything to the utility company. And if you are selling it as a market, how does the energy itself get marked as whether it was clean or not clean? What was the carbon footprint of it? How does it know that it was alternative energy? Even more, could we trade the carbon credits themselves? People trade carbon credits where someone plants a tree and then they sell a carbon credit for it. Or they're now not only doing those on top of us, so the energy, you can buy a kilowatt hour, or the carbon credit, you can buy a ton of CO2 offset. They're now doing markets where the two get glued together. And so you could be buying your energy in real time as you need it, in such a way that you know it's always carbon neutral at the moment you buy it.
Because you're buying the offset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, people have sold and bought offsets in the past in large amounts for large amounts of money, but this takes the friction out of it. You can do it tiny amounts, and you can talk about new kinds of things like gluing the offset with the energy that caused the carbon in the first place, gluing them together and selling them as a thing. Tokenization is changing everything. And I think that we are at the very beginning of the tip of the iceberg on this. All of society is going to end up tokenizing and creating markets and things that we never even thought of as having value and being something you could buy and sell. I'm very excited about the future of tokenizing things.
Yeah, no, us too. I mean, just like hearing you talk, I feel like I've tried to convince everyone that I come and encounter with that same side of this is what the future is going to be, and everything is going to be tokenized. And the ways in which, you know, the 16-year-old right now that's playing Twitch and coding in front of someone is going to tokenize something is much different than the way you or I would think about it. And so, you know, I think you guys have done a nice job though of that vision, but then also kind of real world application today. Right. And where the rest, you know, obviously the rest of the world, and, you know, when you think about governments, even more laggard in that kind of adoption phase. So what have you guys done differently to try and kind of bring those, you know, some of the more old school type folks who are thinking through that? It's like, you know, even some of the banks, right? They can't do AML. They don't want something that's settled potentially in a country, or a transaction is confirmed in a country that maybe, you know, they're not fond of. I mean, how do you get them over that hump?
Yeah. So we have, right? We have the biggest bank in Africa. We have the oldest bank in South Korea. We have one of the largest financial institutions in Japan. We have this payments group, FPOS, in Australia, which is just a household name. We have FIS WorldPay that no one's ever heard of, but half of all the credit card transactions in the world flow through them. So, you know, is the financial industry interested in us? Yeah, these guys actually own us. They actually run Hedera. They are the governing council of Hedera. Why are they interested now and not in the past? And I mentioned that originally, this was a no-no for any bank or any financial institution. You don't have anything to do with blockchains. This is all too scary. That made it sound sarcastic. It wasn't that they were stupid. It was scary then. The world has actually changed.
Still scary for a lot of people, but a lot of adoption. So like how did you guys do it? How did you convince them?
So part of it was just that the world has changed. So, you know, like the US said that banks can actually run a node in a network now. That used to not be the case. And they can hold digital assets. Part of it is that we were able to say, look, we are serious about security. This is going to be safe. When you work on us, what you put onto us will be safe. Why is it safe? Well, first of all, we have these math proofs that it's ABFT, that DDoS is not going to cause a fork. Partitioning would not cause a fork. We have all of that. And then in addition, we have this governing council where the governing council members are known. And when they talk to each other, they publish the minutes. Every other month they meet and they publish the minutes. We have transparency of the governance, and we have good governance. And they are not all in one country. There's no single government that can disrupt this because we're spread off in countries around the world. We're on every continent except for Antarctica. And when we go into a bank and we tell them these things, when we tell them we take these things really seriously, and we actually headquartered in the United States and have been talking from the very beginning with the SEC and with Treasury and with CFTC and with all of these different people. We have been trying to do it right from the beginning. And that resonates with people that are scared that if they do something wrong, they're going to have their whole company shut down. People really want to be doing it right. And we have tried from the beginning to be doing things the right way. And so that really is, I think, the biggest thing that has helped them. The other thing is that they have very ambitious ambitions. Their ambitions are reaching high, and they want speed, and they want low price. And those two tend to go together. And so right now we can do 10,000 a second. We have consensus with finality within a few seconds. And we can go higher and we can go faster, and we will do that. Our usage right now is enormous. So we're getting like 80 a second. I looked yesterday, 80 transactions a second of usage, which is way below 10,000. But you know what? We're going to get to 10,000. We're going to get there fairly fast. We are growing. We have in the pipeline, people are going to be using a lot. And the banks want to know, if we actually do start using you, could you handle really serious traffic? And they even ask, can you do it at the L1? Can you do it really at the bottom layer? Does it have to be an L2, or can we actually go to L1 and be fast? And we say, yeah, you can actually do it at L1. We can really be fast at L1. And this was very appealing to a lot of them.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I mean, even thinking like the growth, the headspace there from 80 to 10,000, but even 80 a second is still, you know, if you look around in the crypto space and you actually go and look at Etherscan, you look at some of these things, there's not as much as you think with transaction volume, right? Unless it's like, base level like Ethereum, but it's like when you go to kind of a different side, there's just not as much as people think. So it's like, that's a big number. And it's just kind of, it sounds like doing it right from the beginning, right? Checking those boxes, making people feel comfortable, being transparent, right? Like, it's like you're sitting in this like side layer of like, yes, there still needs to be some sort of governing council because we still have to move the ship a little bit depending on where regulation and these things happen, but decentralized much more or enough to the fault that, things are organized, but also, safe.
Yeah, no, I would say that this decentralized governance is actually critically important. They are in different continents under different governments. When your control is mostly from a dozen mining pool owners in a single country, that is not good for decentralization. What you really want is for them to be spread around the world, and you want to know who they are, and you want transparency, and you want them even to be in different industries. They are all huge. So big university, top 10 university, top 10 company in different fields even, so they can keep checks and balances on each other. And so that's really important. And then you're right, we are used a lot. In fact, we're the most used ledger right now. We just finished, I think, 1.4 billion transactions that we have processed. That's more than anyone else, more than Ethereum and Bitcoin put together. And we're doing them faster, more per second than anyone else right now. We're the most used ledger. And we are on a trajectory to be vastly faster than that. We are really happy that in only a year and a half, we got to over 1 billion. We're going to go to 1 billion a month, 1 billion a week. We're going to go to a really high level. And the people we're talking about that are saying they're going to build on us are talking about numbers that will actually get us to enormous volumes. And they can do it because it's cheap and predictable. It's denominated in US dollars. And so you can predict what your cost will be to build a company on us. A lot of people are interested in that.
What are the theoretical limits on your transactions per second and finality? Is it, can this just grow infinitely, or are there some limitations?
So within a single shard, the limits are basically the limits of the internet. So if all you wanted to do was, and the limits of how much a single computer can process, there's some limit to how many transactions a second a single computer can process. If you didn't have to process the transactions, then you could do hundreds of thousands. We've shown that. If you want to actually process them, we can go a lot faster than we're doing right now. We've slowed it down to 10,000 just because we don't need more speed right now. We want to get the features out, but you can go far faster than that. The bottleneck is not even checking the signatures, but if we needed to, we could. We actually took the effort to write code that would run on a GPU to check signatures fast, and we can now check signatures at 3 million a second, which isn't bad, and that includes even the time to go out to the GPU card and come back. So the speed will go up over time quite a bit to a multiple of the 10,000 we're currently doing. And that's for a single shard. And so what you want to do then is you want to have multiple shards when you want to go beyond that. And we can do multiple shards. You can also do L2 stuff, but you can just do multiple shards, which in some ways can be better. And with multiple shards, it's like multiple independent networks all doing their own thing. However, they can talk to each other. And as long as they can talk to each other, they can send things back and forth and they can cooperate. And it's like one big network. To do that, though, if you want to continue to be Byzantine fault tolerant and you want to continue to be asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant, then you need a way for these shards to talk to each other fast and know for sure that the message it received was the consensus of that other shard. So one shard needs to tell another one, hey, here's that, and I need to give you proof. So what you need is cryptographic proof that what you're looking at truly came from Hedera, not just one node on Hedera, but was the consensus of all of the Hedera nodes in the network. And so right now our mirror nodes have that. They get cryptographic proof that all these things that are supposedly transactions from us really are from us. And it's cryptographically proved to them. And we will have state proofs that are even better state proofs that allow individual transactions to have state proofs. And those will be used for talking back and forth between shards. So you want infinite speed? Sure, with sharding you have infinite speed if you have infinite shards. It's not actually true. For some processing patterns, for some patterns of transactions, like if everyone in the world is always talking to a single account, then sharding doesn't really help you. But what you can do is you can replicate it across different shards, and as long as your communication is always, or your transactions are always with different pairs of shards, then infinite shards gives you infinite speed. In the real world, what you end up with is somewhere between that, somewhere between the speed of a shard and infinite speed. depending on the pattern of your transactions. But you can go really, really fast with sharding. And so, yeah, there's in some sense no limit to how fast we can go.
So I'm looking at your site with your governance council. I see, Google, Deutsche Telekom, Boeing, Chainlink Labs. I mean, this is a who's who. This is amazing. I'm curious where all of that speed, how that relates to how they're thinking of using Hedera. And I guess what I'm asking is, like, what are the user experience of implications of this? What are the different kinds of things that we're going to see built when we have so much speed?
So that's what's fun. Anytime in history something gets 1 million times faster, you don't just do the old things faster. You do new kinds of things that never existed before. So what is going to happen? Well, we're going to be able to tokenize things and eliminate the middleman in a lot of ways. Right now, you have Uber that controls all these cars. So why can't the cars all just be independent contractors that are coordinating with each other through a ledger? Right now, you have sending a wire through your bank takes days and costs you $30. Well, why can't it take seconds and cost me 1/100 of a penny? Why can't these things be done? Well, the reason they can't be done is because we haven't done it yet. I mean, we as a society haven't done it yet, but it's coming. What do you need to be able to truly change society where everything you do can be tokenized? You can be tokenizing your attention. Instead of people spying on you with the advertisements and modeling who you are, maybe you get paid by them to give them information. You can tokenize your own attention. There's all sorts of things you can tokenize that we don't even think about right now because it's too hard to do. But when it's really fast and really cheap, we can start doing those things. And so I think we're going to start seeing tokenization across all of society, just changing everything. Every part of society is going to end up being affected by ledgers. And it's because they can be fast and cheap, have predictable pricing. It's now becoming practical to start doing all of these things. Credit cards can move entirely to ledgers. Everything can start moving to ledgers. Sorry, not everything. That's silly. There will always be purposes for a single server doing something. But every part of the economy will use ledgers in some way. Every part of society will be using ledgers in some way. And even countries are interested with CBDCs. We're just seeing across the board that everyone is moving towards a future just because it makes so much sense. Oh, I got to say one other example. You buy a house, you have to do a title search to make sure the person selling you the house owns it. It takes weeks and you pay, $1,000 to get a title search. Why can't you do it in seconds and pay 1/100 of a cent? If we can put everything into ledgers where you can know for sure that it's true, then the ownership of houses, basically that's tokenizing houses. And it's hard for me to go out and buy 1/1,000th of a house. I could buy a share in a REIT, but it still is not as easy to do. And I can't do it without a stockbroker. Why can't we just do it with ledgers? Why can't stock markets themselves be done on ledgers? If you have speed and fairness matters too, then you can do it.
Amazing. So on that note of your governance council, just I guess many questions around that, but like how is a member of your council chosen? What role and rights do they have? How does voting work? How does that all come together?
Oh, great questions. So they are brought in. The requirements are that they be huge. So, a top 10 university or the equivalent, or a Fortune 500 company or the equivalent, or a nonprofit that's huge, some kind of a huge organization that has been around for a while that people trust. Now, Chainlink we have because they are huge in the blockchain world. And that they are governing us, they are controlling us, and this is wonderful. So being huge in your world, in your market, can be good. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have the right number of billions of dollars of market cap. It can be huge in a different sense. So you have to be big, you have to be trusted, you have to be something that people would want to rely on. In addition, it has to be decentralized, is geographically across the world. You can't all be in one country, and we very much are looking at that. How many do we have in Africa and the Middle East and Europe and Asia and North America and South America? And how do we balance that? This is something we look at a lot. You also then, once you become a member, you are able to vote on things. Now, what do you vote on? So the council itself is controlling the code base, what features get implemented and when they get implemented. It is controlling the treasury, how the coins are used for building up the ecosystem for whatever. It is controlling, we're building up to 39 members, But I forgot to mention that they have term limits. We don't want this to become an ossified, frozen organization that eventually just becomes corrupt. We want to have turnover. We want to have new blood all the time. And so, like I said, I didn't say, but we are building a 100-year ledger here. We want this to be around for 100 years. And so we've thought through things like, well, 50 years from now, we may not trust these companies anymore. And so what we have done is we have said there's term limits. They have 3-year terms. They can only do 2 terms. So it's a 6-year limit, and then they have to leave. And then they can come back someday, but only if the council itself votes for them to come back. So the council itself is voting on who then joins the council and ensuring that we have a steady stream of reliable people. These are the things that the council is controlling. How do they control it? Well, they meet every other month, and on the big questions, they have a vote. And so every other month, the council is voting a vote. They have lots of votes every other month, and the minutes are published, and you can see the minutes. In addition, the council has created committees, and these committees vote on things and give recommendations to the council to approve, and some things the committees themselves have had delegated to them to do. And so there's a committee for the technology. The HIP process, the Hedera improvement process. This is where people around the world keep saying, hey, you ought to do this, or hey, this is how the feature ought to be done. And then they go back and forth and they debate how it should be done, and we end up with something really good as a proposal. Then we have to say, okay, in what order are we going to implement these? What are their priorities? Are we going to implement them? So TechCom, the technical community, looks at them and approves them. And that's how they move forward. And so the council has delegated to the TechCom the ability to do that. And so that's exciting. We now have had some of the first HIPs have been approved, and there's other HIPs that are in process right now. And I love all the traffic I see from people around the world getting involved in that. The council makes the ultimate decision on the features, but it's the community that's saying, here are the features we need, and here's what they exactly should look like, and then fine-tuning them and fixing them and stuff. So the council does all that. The council, of course, has a board of directors, and it's involved in some of the decisions. I mean, the council as a whole can give some of the detail work to the board of directors, but the overall steering of the ship is by the council itself. In addition, we do on-chain governance of transferring these tokens. So the council votes for how are we going to do, how are we going to spend our coins? Should we give them to the ecosystem? Should we be giving grants to companies? Yes, we give lots of grants to companies. We are giving lots to the ecosystem, and we will have more announcements soon on all of those. How do the coins actually come out of the treasury that's controlled by the council? It actually has their signatures on it. We have multi-sig accounts. It has to be signed by a majority of the council members. A council member is an organization that has several individuals. They might say, well, 2 out of 3 of our individuals have to sign, or 1 out of our 3 individuals have to sign to count as a signature for us. So it's actually a multi-layer signature system. Each council member gets to decide, do they need 2 of their 3 people, or 3 of their 10 people, or 1 out of their 2 people, whatever. They decide the rules for what counts as a council signature. And then we, above that, have the rules being it has to be a majority of those signatures. And all those rules are built into Hedera, that when you create an account, anybody can create equally complicated systems of keys on their account. And so we're using our own systems there to put all those keys on the account. And then the council signs it, and the transaction happens, and the coins actually move. Only if we get a majority of the members, where a member counts if it only has some threshold of its participants. So this is the detailed way it works. Right now, for code updates, it's currently being done manually, but it will also be done with a transaction. So ultimately, what will happen is when you want to update the code on all the nodes, a transaction goes out and has to have been signed by a majority of the council, meaning a majority of the council members, each of which has some threshold of their members, their participants. And that magic transaction will trigger the update of the code. And all the nodes will update together. We don't have forking. They all update together. This is how the council governs. From voting, from publishing the minutes for transparency, all the way down to digitally signing transactions that make things happen. You said it's like a DAO. Well, that's very DAO-like in that sense. And so that's kind of how it works. And we talk about it. We don't talk about it a whole lot. A lot of people don't ask questions. I love that you ask the questions about what's the nitty-gritty of how does it actually work. And that's how it works.
It's important, and it's a huge problem on some of the largest, projects out there. I'm not going to name any, but like governance is completely non-transparent. You have no idea how decisions are being made. It's a huge problem. A follow-up question on that, council: Are you finding, obviously they're becoming intimately familiar with Hedera Hashgraph as they're involved in this process. They're vested. They're experts. Are you finding that as members are part of the council, they're adopting Hedera and building applications as part of that process?
Yes. In fact, that's one of the main reasons they want to join, is because they're doing that. So I told you, hey, somebody is tokenizing fine art and expensive things. Yeah, DLA Piper, one of the world's largest legal firms. They're one of our council members, and they're doing this. I told you, we have a council member, FPOS, that's a household name for payments in Australia. Yes, but they're doing micropayments on Hedera. The council members themselves, Avery Dennison, you may know them as they do labels and they do paper. Well, they also do RFID. And they are doing a big push to do stuff with all that on top of us. All of our council members are doing really big things. Not all of them, some of them are putting off, but some of them are right now doing things on top of us, which is cool. IBM, is very much involved in Hyperledger. If you're familiar with how Hyperledger works, you have a bunch of computers, you set up like a private network, you can do anything you want. And at the bottom, you need what they call an ordering service, which is something that puts the things in order. There is now a plugin to Hyperledger that lets Hedera be the ordering service for it. So you have this private network. You can even encrypt for total privacy. You can make it closed or open to the world, whatever you want. But all of the consensus is being done by Hedera. And so, IBM has worked with that. I actually did a joint streaming call with them, and we published something. It's on our YouTube channel with them, published a white paper with them, with IBM. So IBM is excited about this. By the way, we also have plugins for Corda and for EEA. We have lots of plugins for if you want to stand up a private network and then use Hedera to give it the trust layer, you can do that.
So anonymously use the larger ledger, but still have the kind of privacy side.
Yeah.
Cool.
And flexibility. You could write the code in any language you want, and it works because it's on your own little ledger. You have complete control over it. It runs at the speed of the native layer. You don't have to use a smart contract that's one layer up, or an L2 that's even more layers up. You can do it at the speed of the native layer. Yeah.
You said there's going to be 39 members to the council, and right now, how many are there?
We have 21, and we have a pipeline that we'll be announcing in the near future of a steady drumbeat of more. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. Yes, we have Google. I keep looking over here on the side. One guy mentioned power transition. I should say that some third party published a report saying we use 1/5 millionth the energy of other ledgers, which is kind of fun. By the way, we're carbon neutral, actually carbon negative. We're talking about carbon credits. Isn't it great people are trading carbon credits on top of us? Yes, but an example of dog fooding, we're also buying carbon credits. We are carbon neutral for our ledger, or carbon negative, for our ledger.
Negative meaning you're buying more credits than you're consuming. Got it.
That's
okay.
Right. That's right.
There's a comment in the chat. It says Google powered by Hedera, and it's got me thinking. Let's throw a scenario here. What if Google wanted to take search and put it on a ledger? Obviously, we're talking absolutely insane amount of volume. Is that possible?
So it depends on what we mean about how you put it on the ledger. Doing search of the information on the ledger makes a whole lot of sense, and Google could be doing that. Having the search engine, the search engine is a program, and it has a database of what all the web pages in the world are saying. Google has that. There would be no particular advantage to putting that database on the ledger because people can't see the database directly anyway. The program, why do you put things on a ledger? You put it when it's important that everybody sees the same information. It's important when information can only be changed the way it's supposed to. Like if I have a token, only I with my signature can make it move to somebody else. So that's controlled mutability. Also, there should be immutability for some of the past. So the history of the AdStax things has to be an immutable record. So you want the immutability, the controlled mutability, the guarantee that everybody is seeing the same thing, that you aren't cooking the books. Like I said, in the ad industry, that sort of thing happens. AdStax is stamping out that kind of fraud by using Hedera. For search, I don't know if those things apply. Do I need an immutable history of what the Google databases look like throughout history? Maybe not. I don't even know if actually it's probably too many exabytes to even store that. Does it need to know for sure that everybody sees the same thing when they search? No. Google's best thing is they customize it. When you search, you get things customized based on what you searched for recently and where you are and so on. Do they need a, I don't know. So I don't know if the search engine itself would live on a ledger because it doesn't have the use cases for the ledger. But search engines can search what's stored on the ledger. And that I see. So like block explorers, chain explorers, you can imagine things like Google doing that. So this is going back to what I said before. It is wrong to say everything will be done with ledgers. That's not true. When the internet came, that didn't eliminate all things that were done without the internet. But what it did do is it seeped into every area of our world. Every piece of what we do uses the internet, and ledgers are going to be the same way. So maybe the search engine and its database isn't sitting on Hedera, but the search engine is archiving what Hedera has and is telling people about it. In fact, our mirror nodes, in some sense, are search engines for Hedera. And this, I think, we'll see more and more of it as we go along, where you use things that make sense. They may not be a ledger, but somehow they interact with ledgers. And Hedera is at the forefront of that.
It's interesting. It's kind of like almost like an SSL cert of like, you know, that the network is secure of what's coming across, but it would be also interesting to see. It's like when I visit a site, they're always like, oh, make sure this is the exact site that you typed in. It's like, well, just like people can kind of create almost like a pineapple network, right? And you could not know which one that you're connected to, like using the ledger of whatever. If Google wanted to use that, then they can actually say, hey, you're looking at Wikipedia, the true Wikipedia, or you're looking at the true HederaHashgraph.com, and make that very transparent as we move into this, world where people, could potentially kind of like spoof things.
Yes, I love what you're saying. So you could do something like a Wikipedia. Probably the entire Wikipedia database would be stored on some server somewhere, but
Right.
hashes of it would be stored in Hedera, or hashes of it would flow through the Hedera consensus service to store a history of it. And then you could use that to know that you're seeing the real Wikipedia. There are companies doing that right now with fake news. On top of Hedera, they are trying to combat fake news by stamping and signing and then putting through Hedera the news articles so that you know they weren't modified by some malicious person. They're even doing this with recollections of the Holocaust to combat Holocaust deniers.
Exactly what I was going to say. History. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we're seeing this. We're seeing people build this kind of thing on Hedera, and I'm really excited about that. And again, they're not storing somebody's video about the Holocaust on a file on Hedera. There's no need for that. They store it on a server, but they're storing a hash of it on Hedera and metadata on Hedera. And that makes a lot of sense.
It's really interesting because I just came back from Mexico and I must have had to get a COVID test, had to fill out 4 forms that all went all over the place, that neither the US or Mexico shared the data easily with each other in any sort of real-time manner. It's like we're living through that right now. It's crazy. And is the data right anywhere? Probably not. There's all sorts of challenges there. So I guess a question on just demand. Where do you see the greatest demand coming from, I guess, now and moving forward? What are some of the areas that you're focused on?
Yeah, so I think we see huge demand for tokenization. We see huge demand in the financial world. We do see huge demand in, you might call it the supply chain world, where you deal with provenance and where did something come from. We're seeing huge demand in the world where there are things like coupons or ads, where there's a lot of traffic involving a large number of different parties, and there's a lot of fraud. And so these are some of the areas where I'm seeing the low-hanging fruit. We haven't yet seen a huge number of markets being built where they do the trading itself, but we're starting to see that now, and people are building that on Hedera. I think that'll be the next big generation of things to come. But first, you have to get these basic things done. Another thing that I think we're going to see is sort of the next generation is a lot more identity work being done. There is identity work being done, but you could see more. We talked about COVID. Well, the obvious thing is you have something like a COVID ID card. But wait, maybe I want to prove to someone that I have been COVID tested, but I don't want them to see my name.
Right.
That's not an ID card. That's not good.
Yep.
And if the ID card is just an app on your phone, it's still not good. You want to be able to control what information you give. And so you use zero knowledge proofs and all of that. People are working on that sort of thing where you build it on top of Hedera. You store hashes and things inside of our files, but you enable then people to be able to electronically prove I had a vaccine, without telling you where I had it or when I had it or where I live or who I am or anything. Or I can prove I'm over 21 without telling you anything else about me. This is where we're headed. And so I think that the next few generations of huge apps are going to be around identity. They're going to be around markets for things. We're seeing that already. But the huge flow right now is in things like tokenization, proof of action, showing that you have done something, provenance, some of these things is where we're seeing huge adoption right now.
How do we get to a point, Leemon, where we talked about homes, right, and lending, and it's like DeFi was, it's obviously like the next step in everything, right? Like obviously you need like the financial system. There's so many middlemen. Like think about how many people work at a bank that probably, are a lot of extra there, right? That's all I'll say. But like going back to kind of the house example, right? Like with lending creates innovation, startups, like grants, everything that's going on there, but the identity piece of that. So I go to buy a house right now. If I want to use a DeFi platform, I can only borrow as much as I have. Right. But if I, like people want to tokenize their future income stream, right? It seems like there's probably a thread there to kind of follow. But it's like, if I want to go purchase this house and I don't want them to know who I am, they don't need to know how much money I have or anything else, but I should be able to qualify, right? Because if I'm in the United States, I have a FICO score and I have all of these things, right? And they know what I do, and here's a W-2 and all of that, but they know so much about you. Like, how do we get to this point where that could be like anonymous? And, is this the identity problem that we need to solve first?
Possibly. So you could imagine buying a house with HBARs and you just pay the HBARs and you get the house. Of course, you can't really do that atomically unless the house itself is tokenized. So you do that. Then we need to know that the owner of the house truly owns it. Sorry, we don't have to know that. We have to know that the token you're talking about truly owns that house.
Yeah.
It truly represents ownership. But for that, you can have legal documents and you can have a whole legal infrastructure, which is being built. There are people working on that right now, building things on top of us to show that this tokenized artwork actually is related to that artwork, or this tokenized house really does give you ownership of that house. So this is all being set up right now. When this is all set up, then you can imagine completely anonymous transactions. I give you some cryptocurrency, you give me a house. Or I give you tokenized gold and you give me tokenized houses. Or if you're under a regulatory regime where the government needs to be able to crack down on drug dealers and terrorists, then maybe you give some information, but it's the bare minimum that would be needed. Maybe you even give encrypted information that can only be decrypted with a court order if there's evidence that you're bad. I don't know. So this is something that the legislatures have to work through as well. What I do know is that in our current system, there's no way to do any of that. You just give me everything because you have to give me everything. There's no way to be nuanced in what you give me. And so they ask for everything and you give up all your privacy and you have no privacy.
Yeah.
We are going to move to a world where ledgers and Hedera specifically are enabling you to have real privacy. And then we can start, we have the ability to do it, to then say, what are the single pieces of information that actually have to be sent and what aren't? And to whom do they have to be sent? Does the house seller have to know this, or is it just some third party that has to know it? And can we set up information escrow where they only know it if a court says it? All those things are questions that have to be worked out by society as a whole. And by society, I mean the whole planet society. But you can't start that discussion until you have the technical ability to do it. And that's what we're providing.
Yeah, the infrastructure, it's like you can see all the pieces. The infrastructure is there. It's just a couple more gaps that need to be filled, and we're there. Because I just want to walk up to the house and my phone changes into the key, and whoever the previous person was, and I don't know, the key is now no longer there. And boom, I walk into my new house and I didn't even, because in real time, if it's anonymous, they should just know how much I have, how much I'm making, everything. I should just have a number that says, which house do you want to buy? Tap here, right?
Yes.
Like it's so close.
Yes, we are headed to that. I can't wait for that day. And that's if you're buying the house for cash. If you want a mortgage, maybe that can be automated in ways too, where they don't have to do a credit check and whatever. You just have some tokenized assets that become your collateral and you borrow against that. There's all sorts of interesting ways to just take out the enormous amount of friction and pain in the current process.
Yeah.
I'm curious if that middleman regime of all of those processes just keels over and dies, or if they fight and fight and fight, causing the solution that may exist in just a few years to elongate that to be 20, 30, 40 years before it actually gets into place, or again, they just roll over and die. So it's going to be an interesting next few years.
It will be interesting. And I guess some people will do one and some people will do the other. I am seeing a surprisingly large number saying, if you can't beat them, join them. And they're saying, I understand my
Right.
current business will be put out of business. Great. I'm going to change my current business to one that
Right.
isn't. I love that.
Yeah, it's competitive advantage right there for sure.
That's it.
Adapt or die.
Adapt or die.
But it's important because a lot of the people that are running some of these businesses, they have adapted because things have changed. It's like what was the old "Who moved my cheese," right? Like they you just have to adapt and move and change, and they will. But I think it's going to take time, and some people are going to fight tooth and nail. But at the end of the day, who do you have your money on, right? The droves of people leaving the Googles and Apples and all the intelligent engineers and the entrepreneurs and the people that want to just sit around all day and solve really impossible puzzles because they're curious, or the person that is at, blank title company that didn't want to take the risk or the leap. So I know where I'm putting my money.
It's a fast changing world, and it's who moved my cheese. You need to adapt or die. But yeah, adapt. It's great. It makes the world better.
Yeah. I know we got a couple minutes left. I don't know, John, if you saw anything in the chat. I just saw a bunch of compliments on Leemon. But like, what puzzle are you working on right now?
In one of my town halls, I actually showed a math puzzle. It's can you take a tree and color it with a small number of colors? And it turns out to have a practical application for jam resistance, having radios that talk to each other and they're hard to jam. I actually have some college students right now working on a project on that. Yeah, I have lots of fun math problems. There's a cryptography problem I was playing with last night. I'm really into fractals right now and working on some interesting math questions about that. Fun stuff.
I love it.
We've got a couple questions about Lambos in the chat. Someone's going to use their HBAR bag as collateral for the Lambo. That's from Coinman. And Chris Fox also wants to know if they want to buy a Lambo. I know they're joking, but it's actually interesting. Their point of sale, I go in to buy anything. Are we going to be buying things with HBAR? Are we going to be buying things with dollars and it converts into HBAR? I mean, how do you see point of sale progressing?
Yeah, good point.
All of the above. You'll be buying things with HBARs. You'll also be buying things with tokens. One of our services is a token service. People will create tokens. People are tokenizing gold and diamonds and other things of value. You can't really go into Starbucks and give them a millionth of your diamond that you're holding to pay for your cup of coffee. But once it's tokenized, you could. So I think we're going to see all of the above. And then we're going to see CBDCs, actual countries having currencies that are also wrapped on ledgers or maybe on ledgers. I think we're going to see both of those. So yeah, the whole gamut is what we're going to be seeing in the future.
Yeah. And not asking you to reveal anything unless you want to, but what can the community look forward to with Hedera in the future?
More of what we've been doing, which is adding whole new features. Some of the features we've talked about, some we're still kind of thinking about. If you guys have ideas, submit them in the HIP process, and then we'll know to do them. And you can also influence what they look like when they finally get implemented, because we put that through the HIP process. So we just have lots of these things. And I've talked about some of them in this talk, and we're always thinking of new ideas. If you have new ideas, tell us new ideas. We might do those too.
And where do they go for that? Just hedera.com?
Sure, hedera.com. The HIP is actually done through GitHub, but I think there are links on hedera.com to the GitHub thing. Yes, there's a lot of discussion in Discord and other places, but I think it's on GitHub. I mean, it is on GitHub. I forgot which of the GitHubs it is. Go to hedera.com.
We'll find it. We'll put it in the show notes. Don't worry about it.
Okay, do that.
There's also a lot of comments about CBDCs. This is a hot topic right now. I think we're going to see a whole lot more. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you see CBDCs going.
I think it's real. And there was a time when I wondered, are governments going to be too afraid of what's new to not do it? And I'm no longer worried about that. You're seeing small countries saying, we're going to do CBDCs right away. You're seeing medium-sized countries looking at CBDCs. You're seeing really big countries doing it. China's interested in this sort of thing. The US Congress is talking about this sort of thing. I think we're seeing CBDCs being something real. And some of them will be a token on an entirely private network with lots of bridges to other networks. Some of them will be on things like our AppNet, where it's a private network, but it has Hedera for the consensus. Some of them will be done just on a network, like using the tokens on Hedera as a CBDC. There's many different ways of doing it, but it's not worth doing unless you're interoperable with the world. And so they'll definitely make it interoperable with the world. And Hedera will be playing a part of it. So either it's a token on Hedera, or it's an AppNet with Hedera, or it's a private network that has bridges to Hedera, or a private network that bridges to other networks but uses Hedera's AppNets as the bridge, all sorts of different permutations. The countries of the world are trying to figure out how best to do it. And it's an open question what they will come up with. If you are a voter in some country on this planet, please vote. But I think it's going to happen. At this point, I think it will happen widespread around the world. It's just a question of exactly what it ends up looking like. And so vote, tell your representatives.
Did you sort of just say that some of these countries are working with Hedera to do CBDCs?
I did not say those words.
Okay,
Absolutely not.
Okay, just trying to clarify.
So we talk to lots of people, but of course we can't talk about what we're talking about.
Of course,
so
right.
I'm
of course.
Sorry for that.
I got it.
Announcement of announcements of a non-announcement. I love it. It is interesting to see it just to think of this future of kind of this tokenization of everything. And like, it's really just this like unlocking of every asset that you now can like utilize. And people don't realize that it's like, 20 years from now, hopefully faster, it's like, you're just gonna be able to spend from wherever, right? Whatever asset that you have. And these are all just gonna be commodities that are easily accessible in any which way, shape or form, and spend them however you want to spend them. And unlocking this, because it's pretty amazing that it's like a lot of people, like we talk about privacy, but I think it's just simplicity, right? And giving someone that might not know how to, it's like, hey, my house has gone up in value and I need to, pay for my, kids to go to school or do something. And I want to unlock that asset. Some people are just like, man, I don't know how to do that. Or that seems hard, or that seems difficult. Versus if there's an app sitting there and they can just tap things, it unlocks this and it creates and democratizes opportunity for people that otherwise would not have that opportunity. And I think that's a big key to this, on top of privacy, obviously.
Yes, it democratizes the ability to do these things. People in third world countries that can't even get a bank because they don't have identity and they don't have a bank account and they don't have any way to transfer money, this is going to be opening up things to them as well. I really think this is going to give people the ability to do things and take anything of value. You have something in an online game that is of value, it becomes a token, and then eventually it becomes a token you can trade to people around the world and even move to other games. Anything that you care about is going to end up being tokenized, which means you're going to be able to just easily move it back and forth with total trust. I love it.
Love it. Awesome, man. Well, we're at the hour mark. I really, truly appreciate you coming on. It was so much fun to get to chat with you about everything. I obviously have a huge fan base in the audience here. People are loving it. You're thinking in all the right ways. And I just, so happy that you're in this industry working with us, and it's awesome. So this has been great.
Thanks. I really appreciate being able to join you. Thanks for having me here. This has been wonderful. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, everyone in the chat. John, as always. And